With media and fan pressure on the Lakers organization on a constant basis, the task for GM Rob Pelinka remains arduous. And now that the draft, free agency, and many trade rumors are all in the rearview mirror, the Lakers are still faced with the same dilemma that plagued them this past season. That, of course, is the poor fit on the court between Russell Westbrook and LeBron James. Nearly every day a trade is proposed for Westbrook, with the Nets, Pacers, Jazz, and Knicks continually being listed as the trade partners. Being determined to not putting the same starting lineup on the floor as a season ago, the consistent rumored asking price has been 2 first-round draft picks. Many fans have been divided on whether or not this is worth it. With each individual deal on the table having different benefits, which ones present the most upside and what are the risks? And what are the pros and cons of pulling a trade versus not doing so? The pros of a trade include possible instant success due to a better on-court fit with the players that would come back from a Westbrook trade, particularly shooters who could create more spacing. It would seem that one of the pros of any Westbrook trade would be appeasing LeBron James, who is less than 2 weeks away from being eligible to sign an extension. The front office making moves that are favorable to James's liking not only helps on the court, but also off the court when it comes to future negotiations with James and even other clutch clients. Another pro would be an improved locker room with less tension, with Westbrook being removed from it. Though it may not be a benefit to the Lakers not having trade assets after moving them all is the access to upperclassmen college players who bring more experience than some of the first-round talent who, while having more upside, are drafted off potential rather than production. With Austin Reeves, Cole Swider, and Scottie Pippen Jr. all selecting the Lakers specifically, and Max Christie being available in the second round of this year's draft, the Lakers being the glamour franchise is beneficial in that fringe players who prefer more exposure may tell teams outside of the first round they prefer to play for the Lakers, and that there is no need to draft them. With that being said, in order from worst to first, I'll list the options that benefit the Lakers the most. As a disclaimer, the Kyrie Irving trade will not be featured, as it's been discussed many times, but seems to be in a holding pattern as both he and Kevin Durant have been seen working out together and, as of today, may both return to Brooklyn. The least favorable trade would be a Russell Westbrook trade to the Knicks for Julius Randle. With a Westbrook for Randle straight-up deal being illegal from a salary cap perspective, the deal would probably include either Evan Fournier or Derrick Rose. From the Knicks' perspective, adding Rose to the deal would be preferable, as he and Westbrook on the same roster would be a bit redundant. Fournier appears to be a better fit next to newly acquired Jalen Brunson with his size and ability to shoot from long range. From the Lakers' perspective, Rose could provide some of the explosiveness and energy that Westbrook offers, but with a willingness to come off of the bench, something Westbrook probably would not. As far as the main part of the deal, Julius Randle, it's difficult to see how he fits in a lineup with LeBron James, as both like to do similar things on the court. Because of this, most fans would not be in favor of this deal, with some, like myself, even being in favor of keeping Westbrook for 1 year as opposed to Randle's $23 million per year for 4 more years. I'd list this as last, and a deal I definitely wouldn't do, particularly not for the asking price of the 2 first-round draft picks teams want added to the deal. This deal doesn't benefit the Lakers in any way, in my opinion. In light of the Rudy Gobert trade and a still pending Donovan Mitchell trade signaling what appears to be Danny Ainge's decision to start a rebuild in Utah, the Jazz have been mentioned more than any team in recent weeks as a trade partner for the Lakers, with the contracts of Mike Conley Jr. and Bojan Bogdanovic. This deal not only is better from a contractual standpoint, but a better on-court fit as well. You could argue that the Lakers could field an entirely new-look starting lineup with improved shooting and spacing. The fly in the ointment may be Danny Ainge himself. He has a history of fleecing teams in trades and would definitely insist on the 2027 and 29 draft picks. With Bogdanovic in the last year of his deal and Conley having only 1 year remaining after this upcoming season, the Westbrook for Conley and Bogdanovic deal looks right now like the best one on paper. If a deal is struck, this, in my opinion, would be the best trade option. The third option comes with more questions, and that option is no trade at all. The pro here, of course, is holding onto your long-term future by keeping draft picks. Another is simply keeping roster spots open to add veterans from the buyout market without having to send assets back in return. The questions here are, does GM Rob Pelinka feel it's worth keeping those picks? Will that be beneficial in the post-LeBron era? Will the organization simply get behind new coach Darvin Ham and his motivational approach with the current roster intact? Can he find a role that will help the team better than last season? Or will we see a tough start to the Lakers season, followed by a probable trade at the deadline? Some believe the negatives here could affect whether LeBron James remains with the franchise for the next few years, although I believe he stays regardless. What happens next in the Lakerland saga remains to be seen.